فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان
Let us rise for the national anthem. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning. My name is Shamsa Virani, and it is my honor today to be your MC for this conference. My passion is marketing. I live, breathe, and eat marketing. I say that to all my staff. You have to live, breathe, and eat marketing to really be a marketeer. I've done that for the last 20 plus years, and I'm so excited to share this day with you today because I know that we're going to have an exciting day with lots of fabulous speakers where we all have an opportunity to learn. Learning, as you know, is a lifelong process. It doesn't matter how old you are or how many years of experience you've had, there's always an opportunity to learn something new and perhaps even impart something that you know to others. So I hope that you will take that opportunity today. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this conference, MarCon 2019, where we will focus on reimagining marketing in the digital age. The MarCon conference is our flagship event of the year. Our, meaning Marketing Association of Pakistan. And this is the 13th conference of this kind, whereby we've had 7 such conferences in Karachi and 6 in Lahore in past years. And today, I'm delighted to share that we have representatives from various sectors, such as FMCGs, media houses, health services, telcos, advertising agencies, cement, food, print, and electronic media. A really good mix of senior and upcoming marketeers. So I'm sure that we'll have some very interesting discussions. I'd also like to mention Terrabiz as our conference partner, whom we've been working with for this conference as well as the past ones over the years. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers who have traveled from abroad. Mr. Stephen Brost, who's the Chief Technology Officer from Teradata Corporation in the USA, Bharat Avalani, who is a renowned storyteller and memory collector with a background in Unilever veteran, he's a veteran there, EC member of Asian Federation of Advertising Associations and IAA based in Malaysia. Hando Sinisolu, who is the CEO of the Best Marketing International. And last but not least, Mr. Asad Ur-Rahman, who is the Director of Media and Digital Transformation, Unilever Manal. And also, I believe, won an award for Marketing of the Year. I'd like to also thank our speakers who traveled from different cities to attend the conference today. Dr. Farah Arif, who's the founder of EdTech and Assistant Professor in Marketing and Entrepreneurship at LUMS, and Karan Rahat, who's the Director, Business Development, Data and Cloud, Telenor, Pakistan. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you. You are our delegates, our guests, who are going to make this day memorable and productive and valuable. So your participation is imperative if that's going to happen. So I welcome you all to ask lots of questions today, think about the ideas that are being presented, and perhaps even challenge them if you have other ideas or other experiences. This is a conference where we want to bring marketing professionals together so we can learn each other and make this practice of marketing a serious one, a valuable one, and recognized in Pakistan. A couple of housekeeping announcements. Today, in the digital age, we can't reimagine our lives without this, the cell phone. May I make this request that you please put your cell phones on silent. And if you really do have to take a call, which may be the case, please step outside and do that as a respect to your presenters, as well as to your other colleagues who are probably trying to listen to what's being said. So can everyone do that right now, please? Can you take your phones? I don't see anyone moving. Can you take your phones and put it on silent if you haven't already? Thank you. Okay. I also wanted to mention that there are exit signs in this room. And I kind of feel like a flight attendant, but please make sure you know where your nearest exit signs are. And if you need to evacuate, you know how to leave the room. Without much further ado then, let's begin the program. Are you ready?
Yes.
What? Am I here by myself? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay then. All right. You know, as marketeers, we innately have lots of energy. And I don't know, am I in a room full of marketing professionals, executives? Because we have energy, right? Are you ready?
Yes.
All right then, let's begin. I would like to welcome Mr. Ali Hassan Naqvi, who is our president of the Marketing Association of Pakistan. President Ali Hassan Naqvi has been at Dawn Media Group as a marketing practitioner with other roles as well along the way for more than a quarter of a century. He is the right person for Marketing Association of Pakistan for our president. He has also taught at business school, and one of the qualities that he shared with me that's really critical, I think, for a good marketeer, and what's made him successful over the years is to be a good listener. And that he is. So without much further ado, I'd like you to join me in welcoming President Ali Hassan Naqvi to give us an opening address. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamsa. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Marketing Association of Pakistan, it is my privilege to welcome you all here at the latest Marcon that is taking place. We do it every year in Karachi or Lahore, and so for the last 3 decades or so, Marcon has been flagship, as she rightly pointed out. Yes, Shamsa, I'm a good listener because I'm happily married for 22 years now. So yeah. Before I say anything else, I would like to say that much as I would like to take credit for this Marcon, unfortunately I can't because this has been a team effort, and our council members, our office bearers, that have, and apart from that, of course, therapists, our sponsors, they were tirelessly to make it possible. So, could I request all the present council members of NAP to please join me on stage? Some of them still have to join us.
Come in the center, come in the center.
So, Shamsa, will you? Okay, sorry. Mr. Imran, would you do the honor of introducing everyone? Imran is the chairman of Marcon, actually. So, please.
You'll have to do it one more time.
On my extreme left is Mr. Asghar Ahsan, and on my immediate left is Mr. Suhail Aziz, Shamsa Virani on my right, Sayyid Masood Hashmi, and then Dr. Zubair.
So we still have some members missing. They will be joining us shortly. We are very proud that, as you know, Marketing Association of Pakistan is a voluntary organization, and they all have their own businesses, jobs, and yet they take time out to contribute towards the betterment of marketing profession in Pakistan. So a big hand for them. Thank you very much. And I would, your 2 minutes. So before we disperse, I would just like to say that we have a very entertaining and interesting session ahead of us. We thought of different titles, me and my colleagues, and we then thought of choosing marketing or reimagining marketing in the digital age, because we were convinced that ever since the invention of the printing press, this digital age is the greatest equalizer that humanity has seen in the past 2,000 years or so. And therefore, it is going to change everything that we see today. The world that we knew 10 years ago will not be there in the next 20 years. It will be a completely different world. So, with those challenges, it is imperative for us as marketers to see the roadmap and to see how we can fit ourselves in. And therefore, it is with this thought in mind that we, my colleagues, decided to choose this title, which is a very exciting one. So, without much further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Imran, who's the Vice President of Marketing Association of Pakistan, and also the Chairman of Marcon. He's the spirit behind this conference today, to come forward and share his thoughts. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to all of you. I have a 25-page speech. I hope you have patience to listen to it. A lot of thank yous. We have many organizations, individuals who made it possible so that we could have this marathon today. It's really good to see so many people so early in the morning out here. We have a pretty packed day, and I promise you that it will be a very interesting and enlightening day for all of us. We have some of the most talented and experienced speakers who will be sharing their knowledge with us. Some of them have traveled long distances to be with us, and I'm thankful to them for being here today. I'll also take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, without whom it would not have been possible to put up this show. We have a list of our sponsors there, but I would read it out. I'm personally indebted to all of them. Sabib HBL, Teradata, Jubilee Insurance, Sean Foods, Hum Network, IOPM, and K Electric. We have representatives from these organizations here. Thank you for being a part of Marcon 2019. I'm also thankful to our digital and media partners, Mindmap, APNS, which is the All Pakistan Newspaper Society, the Jung Media Group, Hum News, and ARY News. And of course, the organizers and lead partners of this event, Hamza Hashmi and his very able team at Terabase. They're the ones who took away all our worries and created this fine event for us. I'd really like to thank Hamza and his team, Faisal, Saad, and others who've really put in a lot of time and effort, and it's been a pleasure working with you now and in the past as well. I also should go into all my colleagues on the MAP Council who put their trust in me as chairman of Marcon, and were always there with their advice and their time. And this, of course, includes Shamsa, who's here and conducting the program today. I'd like to especially mention the names of 3 of my colleagues who went out of the way to make Marcon 2019 a reality. Our president, Sayyid Ali Hassan Naqvi, and 2 of our past presidents, Sayyid Talib Kareem and Sayyid Masood Hashmi. They went the extra mile to help Marcon. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your help. I would also like to recognize 2 people who've always been there with us, who run the MAP Secretariat. I don't see them here, they're probably outside, Numan Amin and Ghulam Hussain. They've been a constant help and support to the Marketing Association of Pakistan. And finally, it's all of you who are here, our guests and delegates. A big thank you for being here. And I think you would be the best judge end of this evening to decide as to how and what we did, whether it's useful for you. I will not take much more time. I decided to abridge my 20-page speech, and I'll now give the podium to Shamsa to move forward with the program today. Thank you very much.
So now we will move forward with the program, and it is with great excitement that I wish to introduce Mr. Stephen Brobst, Chief Technology Officer for Teradata Corporation. He works with companies on the identification and development of opportunities for the strategic use of business intelligence technology in competitive business environments. He was recently ranked by ExecRank as the #4 CTO in the United States, behind the CTOs from Amazon, Tesla, and Intel, out of a pool of 10,000 CTOs. During Barack Obama's first term, he was appointed to the Presidential Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. Stephen performed his master's and PhD research in computer science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Earlier, he earned an MBA with joint course and thesis work at the Harvard Business School and the MIT Sloan School of Management. We are indeed fortunate to have with us today Stephen Brobst.
Thank you for the introduction. When we think about reimagining marketing in the digital age, there's one thought that should come to your mind: data. Data, and how am I going to use the data to deliver a different experience to your target audience. Whether you're doing B2C or B2B marketing, it's going to be about data. And I'm going to talk about how to leverage data in order to inform algorithms for deep learning. I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence, but the issue here is AI is probably the most overhyped buzzword in the industry today. Everybody in marketing will tell you AI is going to change the world. Yes, that's true, but it doesn't happen overnight. And so expectations are very, very high about what AI is going to do for marketing. What I want to do is bring you to a practical reality. What can you do today? How can I differentiate between science fiction and science reality? So that's my goal for this time that we have together. I first want to talk a little bit about this evolution of using data in marketing. And where are we now, and why is machine learning important? And what is the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence and deep learning? What are the tools? What are the expectations we should have on what this technology is going to do for us in using our data? And what are the pitfalls that we should be avoiding? What are the mistakes that have been made by others before us so that we can avoid them? And then finally, some concluding remarks. So if we look at the use of data in the 1990s, I had to dig in my archives to find this very old-style PowerPoint. Right? This is what PowerPoint looked like in the 1990s. And we talked really mainly about reporting. Marketing likes lots of reports. How many customers did we get today? How many customers did we lose? What was the performance of our campaign? All of these things. I would argue that we generate too many reports in marketing. There are too many reports. What I want to do is actually go beyond the reports and create action. And so, at the turn of the century, we evolved from this reporting, analysis, drill down cubes kind of model into action taking, activating the data warehouse. The ability to capture the data on a continuous real-time basis and detect events that are of interest from a marketing point of view, and then translate those events into actions while the customer is still on our website or in our store or as part of the customer journey, not a week later, a month later. So activating the data was very important. That's what we did in the first part of this century. What I believe that this decade will be remembered by is learning. Machine learning and deep learning. These are the breakthroughs of this decade that is now coming to close as we enter 2019. Now the problem is, here is your marketing expert, and he is not spending his time, for the most part, making decisions. He's spending his time crawling through this big hairball of data. And I know quite a few of you in the audience, and I know this is you. You've got a big hairball of data, and you're spending most of your time looking for the outliers and reconciling data quality problems, and it's not very productive, actually. This data is overwhelming, and increasingly there's more and more and more of this data. In the last 3 years, we've created more data than all previous 40,000 years of human history. But have we created more insight? That's the question. Those are two different things. Data is not insight. Because you have more data does not mean you have more insight. You have to figure out how you're going to squeeze that insight out of the data. And this data is overwhelming. You cannot use brute force. There are not enough marketing people in your organization to use brute force and crawl through all this data. We need help. That help comes in the form of algorithmic applications. Software that is going to crawl through the data and figure out which data should I be paying attention to as a marketeer, which data should I be ignoring. Not only what I should be paying attention to, but in what way should I pay attention? How is it actionable? We need the software to help us. We talk a lot about artificial intelligence. Actually, I think a more appropriate term is going to be augmented intelligence. The software helps the marketeer be smarter. The software is not going to replace marketeers, but it will change the job. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later. So we talk about machine learning. There's a lot of hype about this machine learning. The reality is the mathematics of machine learning are pretty much for 95% of the use of the machine learning the same math that in marketing we've been using for decades. Linear mathematical models, logistic regressions and linear regressions and all of their cousins, this is not new stuff for a data-driven marketeer. We've been using this to predict propensity to buy and understand which products to cross-sell and so on. This we know how to do for a long time. So what is different between what we now call machine learning and what we used to call data mining? Data mining was the previous terminology that we used in the use of this in mathematics. The main difference is not in the mathematical algorithms, but in the automation of those algorithms, the learning part. Because in the past, the issue was that we had the ability to sort of build models and predict, and as soon as we deploy them, as soon as you deploy a model to predict propensity to buy, the performance of that model will start to degrade over time. Because as you start to predict and sell and so on, then customers customer behaviors change, and you have to recalibrate the model. And these data scientists are scarce and expensive, and they've always got too much work to do. And they'll monitor those models, and when the model gets to a certain level of degraded performance, then you go back and tweak the model, introduce new features, change the coefficients, and the performance goes back up again, and then slowly it degrades. You get this sawtooth kind of performance. The beauty of machine learning is we automate that process. So that instead of a data scientist going back and retweaking the model every 6 months, we can continually keep the model at highest performance. Because we are continually learning and automating that process. And eliminating the manual part, because remember, as we move more and more towards data-driven marketing, you cannot do it by brute force. So you've got to figure out how to automate. And this is the beauty of machine learning, is to automate. It's not new mathematics for the most part. It's the automation of the learning process. So we talk about artificial intelligence. It's become really a mainstream conversation. My mother, who is definitely not a technologist, she doesn't care about all this deep learning and artificial intelligence, but she does care about, wow, I will have a self-driving car. This is really cool. I will be able to go from A to B, and I don't have to do the driving. This is artificial intelligence. This is exciting. I'm from Silicon Valley originally. My mother still lives in Silicon Valley. And you can see these cars driving around, and there's no driver. It's something that she couldn't have imagined when she was growing up. Your kids will not be allowed to drive. They will not be allowed to drive because it is safer, more efficient, fewer traffic jams when humans don't do the driving. I've been coming to Karachi for about 20 years now. Believe me, humans should not do driving in Karachi. We will be better off as a society with these software-driven vehicles. But there are a lot of issues. We don't have time to get into those issues today. There are a lot of policy issues and ethical issues and so on that we need to think about. As marketeers, it's our responsibility not just to help sell more stuff, which I know is what your business is probably based on, but also, are we using the data in an ethical way? Are we actually improving the quality of life of the constituents that we are working with, that we consider our customers? So this AI stuff is becoming mainstream. Now the problem is the expectations for artificial intelligence, they've gone through the roof. What I'm showing you here is a depiction of what Gartner calls the hype cycle. When new technologies get introduced into the marketplace, people go, wow, that's a cool technology. And people really want the new technologies to work. They want the new technologies to make their jobs easier and the performance better, and expectations keep growing on the value of this technology. And you've got consultants and salespeople telling you, yes, use the technology. It's going to save the world. It's going to do everything you want to do. It's going to bring you coffee in the morning, everything. And you reach what's called the peak of overinflated expectations, where you think the technology is going to do everything for you. The reality is, it will not. And so, the issue here is, when the expectations are set so high, and now you go and try to use the technology, you'll be disappointed. It's not going to do everything that those salespeople told you it was going to do. And then you crash into what's called a trough of disillusionment. Those consultants were lying to me again. The salespeople were lying to me again. Throw them all away. This is kind of where big data is today. Remember, 5 years ago in Karachi, all people could talk about is big data. Big data this, big data that. Hadoop this, Hadoop that. And now it's like, oh, big data, that didn't deliver on the promises. It's not because big data doesn't have value, it's because the promises were too big. So what happens is, as technologies crash into this trough of disillusionment, then people reset their expectations. It's not that big data was bad technology or a bad thing to be working with, but our expectations were wrong. So the fault was ours because we had wrong expectations. The technology doesn't solve everything, but it solves very interesting things, so we need to reset the expectations and come to what's called a plateau of productivity. The technology does not solve everything, but it solves certain things very well, and we need to figure out what those things are and use the technology in an appropriate way. There's no silver bullet. As much as we want the silver bullet that solves all the problems, it doesn't exist. My goal in this session is to bring you from this peak of overinflated expectations to a plateau of productivity so you don't make a crash. The crash is painful. And you lose value when you fall into this trough of disillusionment. So cross over the trough into the plateau of productivity, and this is where you're going to be most successful. So Gartner made a prediction. By 2020, artificial intelligence will be a top 5 investment priority for 30% of all CIOs. I would argue today, in 2019, I work with a lot of companies all over the world. I will tell you that 75% of the CIOs today, not even waiting to 2020, have made AI a top 3 priority. Not a top 5, a top 3, and it's already at 75%. And by the way, largely it's marketing people that are banging on the door saying, why aren't we using more of this? Because AI, in fact, isn't for the CIO, it's for the CFO. Right? Because the marketing people are the ones that create value from that data. Right? CIO, their job is to sort of be an enabler. But in the end, marketing has to own how do you create the value. Now, when CIOs prioritize these initiatives, they allocate budgets, and when budgets are allocated, startups are born. I will tell you, in Silicon Valley, every day there is a new AI startup born. Every day. The venture capitalists, they can't throw money fast enough to these AI startups. I was actually at one of the incubation centers here in Pakistan yesterday at Lums in Lahore. And they're also incubating AI startups, among other things. So this is not just a Silicon Valley phenomenon, this is a worldwide phenomenon. And right now, there's lots of money flowing into AI. The failures haven't started yet, but they will happen. It's part of the process. Right? You have this big growth stage, and VCs are investing. Eventually, Darwin will take over, and the not-so-good ones will die or be acquired, and there will be a small number that rise to the top. And they get acquired by Google or Facebook, or they become their own great company. That's how it works. That's how innovation works. So we're still in the early stages. You will still get a lot of promises, and those promises in many cases will be higher than what can really be delivered in the near term. So let's set our expectations in a practical, realistic way, because the job of most of the people in this room is not to do academic research, but to deliver value to your companies today. Another Gartner prediction. By 2019, hey, it's 2019, so we're here. What are going to be the most successful use cases for deploying deep learning capabilities within this umbrella of artificial intelligence? There are 3 areas which I consistently see delivering value today, not science fiction, but science reality. The first is demand prediction. So, as marketeers, I'm pretty sure you're interested in predicting the demand for your customers. If you're building recommendation engines, if you're forecasting sales, if you are trying to understand which products to deploy, this technology is going to be very helpful for you. The other two cases, first, fraud detection and condition-based maintenance or failure prediction. I can predict when your car is going to fail before it fails by using sensor technology on the vehicle. And by the way, it's not just a car, it's a machine in your factory. It's even predicting failure for humans. There's wearable sensor technology being deployed experimentally to do this. We're a long way from doing the failure detection on humans, but on machines we can do it pretty well today. Mainly today I'm going to focus on the first use case, because that's the one that is most interesting to most marketing people. How do I build recommendation engines? How do I understand the demand for my customers? We have all this discussion about artificial intelligence, and the question comes, can machines think? The short answer to that question is no. Do not be confused. Machines cannot think. Machines don't have conscience. The problem is that most people's primary source of information about artificial intelligence technology is Hollywood. Hollywood is not a good source of information for this. Hollywood is a good source of entertainment. It's not a good source of factual information. There's a brilliant mathematician who is from England, Alan Turing, who I think phrased the question a little bit better from a nuanced point of view than just can machines think. The real question is, can machines do what we as thinking humans can do? And the answer to that question is yes, sometimes. Yes, sometimes. I would suggest to you that any decision, or almost any decision, that a human can make in 4 seconds or less, AI software with deep learning will make that decision better, faster, cheaper than the human in the very near future. Any decisions you are making in 4 seconds or less. So think about when you're driving down the road, you put your foot on the brake, you change lanes. These decisions are made in a small number of seconds. These decisions, today made by humans, will be replaced by software. Decisions that require creativity are not taken in 4 seconds or less. Those decisions will not be within the realm of practicality for a long time for using AI software. So let's set our expectations appropriately. We're talking about operationally targeted, narrow decisions. Is this claim that has been submitted fraud or not? Yes, no. I can look at that and make the decision quickly, and software will do it better, faster, cheaper than humans in the future. So these are the kinds of decisions that you're going to target. So I talked about machine learning. It's 95% of machine learning, linear mathematical models. Let's talk about the 5%. Because the 5% is small today, but it's going to grow. This is deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And deep learning allows us to see nonlinear relationships in the data. Nonlinear relationships allows us to make more sophisticated predictions and classifications with much more data, higher dimensionality of the data, data that is missing, dirty, fuzzy data. Data quality errors create problems for linear mathematical models in your prediction. The nonlinear models are able to kind of work around the data quality problems more effectively. So deep learning makes use of what are called multi-layered neural networks. This is mathematical modeling that is trying to simulate essentially how the brain works, which is definitely nonlinear. And in this way, we can make decisions in more complex ways, with more complex data. Decisions that you were not able to deal with using the previous generation of algorithms. This does not mean that linear mathematical models are going away. It means that we're going to extend the linear mathematical models with these nonlinear models. We'll talk about this point a little bit later. So why now? Why is this deep learning AI discussion such a hype at the moment? The reality is that the mathematics of multi-layered neural networks have been around for more than 50 years. It is not a new theory. But there have been some significant changes in the technology. It has enabled, just within the last 5 years, huge leaps in progress. 50 years ago, when the discussion of multi-layered neural networks started happening, some people got very excited until they started realizing that the amount of computation of very complex matrix multiplications and floating point operations, it was so much computation that we couldn't afford big enough computers to predict the thing that we were wanting to know about before it happened. And therefore, it wasn't useful. So, neural networks became theoretically interesting, lots of textbooks and PhD theses and conference papers in academic world, but very few practical implementations. Two things happened in the last 5 years. First is those complex mathematical models for implementing the multi-layered neural network, they were simplified with what were called binarized neural networks. I'm not going to bore you with all the mathematics behind it, but the idea is instead of doing these very high-cost floating operations, we did binary operations, which means zeros and ones. And computers are really good at doing zeros and ones very cheap and very fast. And then we mapped these very simple computations to what are called GPUs. I think most of you have heard of CPUs. GPUs stands for graphics processing unit. And you may not be aware of GPUs, but I guess a lot of your kids are, because GPUs were invented essentially to do the amazing graphics for video games. If your kids play World of Warcraft and these kinds of games, those immersive visual experiences are provided by GPUs. NVIDIA is the main player in this, and their stock price has gone way up in the last few years, not because video games are more important, but because we figured out how to make these binarized operations and map them to GPUs, and now we can get orders of magnitude better performance and price performance, and this is very important. So we took this, and then you combine these changes in the algorithms of the GPUs, and you combine that with big data and operational intelligence, and now we've got practical reality. Now AI can be used by companies at scale in a cost-effective way. Absolutely huge. We can take an image of this vehicle, a collection of bits, and we can transform the bits and look at the bits in different ways. These are the different layers of the neural network. And I can predict this is an Audi A7. Now, if you were to ask me, What kind of car this is? I would say, I have no idea. It's a silver car. I'm not an expert. I don't know the car. I don't like cars. I will not be able to tell you anything about this car. But an expert, a human expert, will be able to identify that this is an Audi A7 with a 95% accuracy. They won't get it right 100% of the time, because depending on how fast the car is moving, depending on the angle that you see it, then maybe you say it's an Audi A6, oh, you got it wrong. Deep learning software will get it right about 97% of the time. Will do better than the human expert. Now, you may not care about identifying vehicles. Law enforcement people definitely care about it. But in fact, there are many applications of this kind of classification algorithm. If you have an X-ray of your chest, it's been proven by research at Stanford University that we can use deep learning algorithms to diagnose whether you have pneumonia more accurately than an expert radiologist, better than a human doctor, and definitely cheaper and faster. So the implications are huge. Now, you may say, yes, okay, fine, that's law enforcement, that's healthcare. What about me? I'm in marketing. What does it do for me? So we can take these same technologies. You can, for example, if you're in banking, we have some customers in Marriott that when you go to the ATM, they have noticed that you put your card in, you ask for some money, and you stand and says, please wait, ... And they calculated the number of seconds per year that their customers are looking at the ATM waiting for their money. And there's a lot of attention and a lot of seconds spent looking at please wait, ... This is a lost opportunity from a marketing point of view. I should be telling them something. You know that you can refinance your mortgage, you can get a better rate on your credit card. We're not going to close the deal, but we'll do demand creation. Now, every ATM has a camera in it. This is for security reasons and so on. Every ATM in the country, in the world, has a camera. I can take the camera's image of the person's face, and I can tell you, based on the same technology, did the person read your message or not? I know if they read it. And by the way, I can tell what is their expression. By the expression on their face, I can tell, are they interested or not interested? And that becomes an input variable for your propensity to buy content. If you're trying to sell something, for example, on eBay, I can take a picture with my iPhone of pretty much anything in my garage, in your garage, in the store. I can take a picture of it and I say, eBay, go find me this. And eBay will find it. Visual search capability. There's a retailer that I work with in Germany, and they had a very interesting application. You can actually become a star of your favorite star. You can say, I want to know what is Lady Gaga wearing, and I want to buy that dress. Whatever she's wearing, I want to wear it. So you can actually tag a celebrity, and the application will actually track photos of the celebrity. So if Lady Gaga appears at some Hollywood event or some music event with a new dress, they'll say, Lady Gaga just came with a new dress. Here's a dress you can buy from us. And you can set that up, you can track anybody you want. It's not kind of the application I would use, but they have definitely a lot of popularity in the use of this kind of application. So you have to be creative. That's the job of marketing, to be creative. The AI will not be creative for you. You have to be creative. But then you can use the AI as a tool to execute on your creativity. What I'm showing you here is what's called a convolutional neural network. So basically, we take the data as input, and then we encode the data, and then we decode the data, and then we make a prediction. Most of you in this room don't care about this. Who cares? That's just the technology underneath the covers. But this is the magic that's happening underneath. We're transforming the data and being able to look at the data in different ways and see non-linear relationships in the data. That's really the key. What I've been describing so far is largely what's called supervised learning. So, in order for the algorithms to work, I have to give you a whole bunch of examples where I made a recommendation that people bought and where they didn't buy. That becomes the training set. And then the software is going to look for the patterns of what does it look like for the people who bought, what does it look like for the people who didn't buy, and then in the future we can predict who's going to buy based on those patterns. Now, imagine that you send your kid to school at the age of 4 or 5 years old. For the next 20 years, they're going to get supervised learning. The teachers are going to tell them, here is knowledge, open wide and learn, and I'm going to stuff your brain full of knowledge. Supervised learning. Now, when your kid graduates from university with their master's degree or whatever, has learning stopped? I hope not. Really, the supervised learning is just the foundation so that you can learn even more. But then you have to go into what's called unsupervised learning. So you have to provide feedback. Every time you make a recommendation, it's important that you feed back to the algorithm, did they buy or not buy based on the recommendation? And then with each one of those experiences, the algorithm gets smarter and smarter and smarter. So the supervised learning is really just establishing the foundation so that you really start accelerating learning based on experience, which is this unsupervised learning. 20 years of supervised learning, followed by a lifetime of unsupervised learning. That's for humans. Now, with data and with software, those 20 years, we can't wait 20 years, we're going to do it in 20 hours. And then we've got a lifetime of learning to do based on all the future data that you're going to collect for every experience with your customers. So think not just of supervised learning, but also unsupervised learning when you're deploying this capability. If you do this, your performance will get better, 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 and you will outperform humans. So the days are over when a bunch of marketing people would sit around at a table. How are we going to segment our customers? We're going to segment by age and income and maybe gender. We pick, half a dozen variables, a dozen variables. Right? This is not how you should be doing it today. Today, I want you to give me 3,000 features about every one of your consumers. Every purchase they've made, which category, and what was the distance between the purchases and time, and what is their income, all that stuff. And we're not going to use all 3,000 of those variables. But you, the marketeer, you should not be the one to choose which variables to use. Let the mathematical models, let the machine learning models choose. They will be better than you. And instead of having a dozen segments, you're going to have 100 segments, 200 segments. You cannot manually construct those segments. You're going to use mathematical algorithms for clustering people together, and then within each one of those clusters, your job as a marketeer is to find what does best customer look like. What does best customer look like in each of those segments? And now you have a path. Where is the customer today, and what does best customer look like? And then you have a path to follow. And you're going to automate the process of the treatments and the offers to bring the customer from where they are to what best customer look like. And machine learning is going to be used to make that happen. These are new ways of thinking about how to do marketing. You've got to eliminate manual processes for doing campaign management. That needs to be automated. You've got to eliminate manual processes for how to think about segmentation and so on. The interesting thing about these convolutional neural networks that I showed you earlier is that mathematically you can have any number of layers in the multi-layer neural network, which means you can handle any amount of data you want at the cost of more computation. Mathematically, there's full integrity as you add more layers, and so you can handle more dimensionality and more complex decisions by investing more computation. There are, of course, declining returns. So you have to sort of figure out by experimentation and depending on your data and what you're trying to predict, how many layers of the neural network you need in order to be effective. And this is where marketeers should be working with data scientists. Every marketeer should have a data scientist sitting next to them, helping them understand the data and building these predictive models. The result of this will be huge. Most marketing, so if you look at event-based marketing, most marketing is based on rule system. We develop a set of rules. When this happens, when the deposit is more than this much, and there's been this long since the deposit, and the customer has these attributes, this is the action you should take. A rules engine will allow you to do that. I will tell you that if you use deep learning, these technologies, your predictions will be more accurate, both in true positive detection, as well as decreasing false positives. So false positive, when I thought someone was going to buy something, and I spent a bunch of money marketing to them, but actually they're not interested at all. False positive. We're going to get rid of those, but we're going to actually more accurately detect who, in fact, is really going to buy. So using deep learning compared to rules-based systems, I would expect you to get at least a 50% increase in the true positive detection rate, while at the same time dramatically decreasing false positives. Now people get very excited about deep learning. Deep learning is now the answer. What's the question? This is where the hype starts. I will tell you that the smart club in Silicon Valley, if you look at how Apple or eBay or LinkedIn sort of build their recommendation engines, they don't use deep learning for everything. Deep learning comes at a cost. There's computational cost to do this. And so with deep learning, it doesn't make sense to invest in all the computation for execution in your multi-layer neural network to predict with 99.999% probability 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's much simpler math to do that. So the Smart Club, they actually combine shallow or wide learning, that's linear mathematical models, to figure out the easy stuff, and deep learning to figure out the hard stuff. So use the two together. Don't throw away what you know about how to build your traditional linear models. Expand your linear models with deep learning. But automate both of them. Automate both. Now, one of the biggest issues with AI, and deep learning in particular, is lack of transparency. Lack of transparency. People don't like when a black box tells you what to do with no explanation. I was talking to the chief marketing officer of a large bank in New Zealand, and he said, look, I can't use this technology to automate my campaigns and my recommendation engines because if we're not performing well, my CEO asked me, why do we do this versus that? I say, because the black box told me so, it's not a good answer. So the lack of transparency is a big issue with AI. With linear models, I can write down the formula and say, this is why. We put this much weight in income, and this much weight in gender, and this much weight in age, and this is why we made that recommendation. But with deep learning, actually the mathematics change with every decision. You can't write down the equation. And people don't like that. They don't like the black box nature of these deep learning algorithms. In fact, IDC is an American consulting firm. They predict by 2020, there's going to be a backlash of activists that say, I don't like AI. These are consumer activists. I don't like AI, get it out of my life. I don't trust it, you're manipulating me, I don't understand it, get it out. Now 10% may seem like a small number, but this is a very noisy 10%. If you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was very big some years ago, this is like less than 1% of people involved. 10% is actually a big number, especially when they're noisy. This is a big issue for marketeers, right? Because we need to sort of use this technology in an effective way, but we don't want to alienate our consumers. And in the EU, they passed a law middle of last year, called GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. And I know that this law doesn't apply in Pakistan unless you're doing business in the EU, but you will get your own version of GDPR relatively soon. In California, where I'm from, we just passed the California Consumer Protection Act, which is basically the California version of GDPR. And it goes into effect 1 year from today. Well, not today, but a few days ago. It goes into effect in 2020. So every marketplace will get their own versions of GDPR. As marketeers, we need to be aware that there will be restrictions on the use of the data. And one of the requirements of GDPR is transparency in how data is used. So we look at the progress that will be made in AI. We can talk about more advanced algorithms being more accurate in their predictions, and of course this is interesting. But for me, what's even more interesting is the investment that we need to make in order to create explanations. So at universities like at Cornell University, at Stanford University, MIT, Waterloo, Canada, they're working on algorithms that can explain every decision. So for example, we were working with a bank in Europe, and they developed fraud detection algorithms, which are very, very accurate. But when GDPR came in, then they're not allowed to use it because they can't explain it. When the auditor comes in and says, why was this fraud? Then you couldn't explain it, then you are now in violation of GDPR. So we invested in taking some open source code, and we created what's called locally interpretable model explanation. With every decision, we captured the reasons why we made the decision. This credit card transaction was fraud with 17.6% probability because of the customer segment, the amount, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This transaction, which is a different credit card transaction by a different person, had a different reason that we thought was fraud. So we captured not only the decision, but the explanation for the decision. I'm using a fraud example here, but you could equally make the same kind of explanation for any marketing decision you made. Why did I make this recommendation? So we need to think about not just being more accurate, but also being more transparent. What we are now entering into is really the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to change the way that we work. We talked already about self-driving cars, customer care. Right? When you call a call center and you're talking with a human, that's not going to happen in the future. You're going to talk with a bot, or maybe you're just actually, it's a chat bot and you're typing and you're typing back at someone. But it's not a human typing back to you, it's actually a chat bot. 99.9% of all questions in your call center have been asked before. All we have to do is categorize the information, allow you to navigate it, and give the answer. And now we can give more consistent answers, because when humans are doing it, it's inconsistent. When AI is doing it, it's much more consistent, but of course you can learn and get better, doesn't mean it's always the same. Cashier-free stores, personal assistants, these things, these are all targeted customers. They're all using these AI technologies to, it's not about replacing humans as much as it is giving a higher quality experience. Faster, cheaper, more accurate, more consistent. So people get worried when they see a chart like this, all those jobs are going to go away. Yes, it's true. A lot of jobs are going to go away. A lot of jobs will also be created. industrial revolution, right? Jobs were destroyed, but more jobs were created than jobs were destroyed. But it's going to require different skill sets. So Jerry Kaplan talks about AI not putting people out of business, but skills out of business. New skills will be required. By the way, new skills will be required of marketing people. Because using data to drive your market decisions, using AI algorithms to drive your decisions is different than perhaps how you might have been doing it in the past. It will change. Now, does that mean that marketing people are going to lose their jobs? No, but here's a quote I love from Harvard Business Review. Marketing people will not lose their jobs, but marketing people who use AI to do their job will replace marketing people who don't use AI. So you have to evolve. You have to evolve your skill sets. We still need creativity. Marketing, there's a lot of brute force work for marketing. This is actually not the fun stuff for most marketing people. Right? Marketing, what distinguishes a marketing person is creativity. A good one. A good marketing person is creative. AI software is not going to replace creativity. You should be using AI software so that you can leverage your creativity more effectively. That's really the goal. So people ask me, oh, job market's going to change and so on. What should my kids be studying? Data science. Data science. So this is an article from Harvard Business Review. Data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. These data scientists, they are going to be working with every decision maker, whether the marketing person, whether the finance person, whether the manufacturing person, these data scientists working with the data. You need to cultivate these people within your organization. You need to integrate data scientists into your marketing functions. So that you're working together. Data scientists, data engineers, and marketing people, they create a team. So we build these agile teams, and we need a business owner, that's the marketing person, we need a data scientist, and we need the data engineers. Now sometimes there's some cultural divide between the data engineers and the data scientists and the business people. So I also say you need a family counselor. Right? We'll call that a scrum master or a program manager that kind of orchestrates things and so on. But it's very powerful when you get the right team working together. In the spirit of setting appropriate expectations, using AI to do generalized thinking and reasoning is not something that's going to be practical anytime soon. So broad AI, using AI for strategic decision making, you will not be successful anytime soon. Humans need to own the strategic decision making. But the execution with narrowly defined decisions, operational intelligence, this is where AI is going to play a big role. So this is called NAI, narrow AI. Very focused, very targeted. This is where you're going to be successful. So figure out how you're going to use the data to automate the decisioning so you can scale out more effectively, so you can handle vast amounts of data without manual processes. What are the things I want you to take away from this discussion? First, these deep learning algorithms are very hungry for lots of data. If you think you're going to use deep learning because you got 40,000 data points, not going to work. With linear mathematical models, you can do the training with tens of thousands of data points and be successful. With the non-linear patterns that we're trying to detect with these deep learning algorithms, you need orders of magnitude more data. You need to think about millions of data points. Tens of millions of data points. So when you're scaling up and collecting data, you need all those clicks off the web page and so on. It can't be a manual process, it's going to be an automated process. Handle lots of data with deep learning. Deep learning will continue to evolve. The technology is still advancing very quickly. There's a lot of contributions from the open source world, there's a lot of contributions from academia, industry, working together, there's a lot of advancements happening. And whatever solutions you put into place today, they will change over the next 5 to 8 years, roughly every 2 years. That's more or less it. But you don't have to wait 5 to 8 years before you start using it, because that's too long. That's too much lost opportunity. Think about practical applications today. Don't try to solve all the problems in your company, but look for narrow, targeted applications. And demand prediction, from a market point of view, is one of the most important things you do. The technology is very proven in this area. You need data scientists within your organizations to help you do this. So invest in those people. By the way, the data scientists of yesteryear are not the same as the data scientists today, because even the mathematics are changing. So data scientists, even if they've been doing this for a while, they need to invest in themselves and get better, better, better. So with that, I thank you very much for spending the first part of your morning.
Stephen, for that very thought-provoking and informative talk. I'd like to ask you to stay on stage and invite our president of MAP to present you with a small memento. I'd also like to invite Mr. Kazafi Qayyum, who's the country manager of Terra Data Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, to accompany him. Please come on the stage. Well, it looks like we have a photo op, so thank you for that. Thank you, Stephen. I believe, actually, if we have questions for Stephen, Stephen, can I ask you to stay on for? We don't want to lose you just yet. You're too valuable with all that information. So, do we have any questions? None? Yes, one here at the front, if we can just take the mic. If we can ask that you just introduce yourself and then ask your question, please.
My name is Bharat. I'm a storyteller and a memory collector. My question to you is, can AI tell stories? So, will I be out of job?
I would argue AI cannot tell stories. Storytelling requires creativity. Humans can tell stories. I don't think AI right now can tell stories. Now, there was actually an interesting survey done by Oxford University and Yale University Research. They predict by the year 2050 that AI software will be able to write a New York Times bestseller as a book. But this is 30 years away. It's easy to make predictions 30 years away, because by the time it's there, then anyway, you'll be in a different job. But in the near future, no, I don't believe AI. You got it done. At least until you retire.
Good. Another question, I think I saw a hand up there.
There was a famous debate between Chomsky and Norvig of Google about data science versus AI. Which side you are on?
Actually, I think you might be referring to Elon Musk and Zuckerberg, right? Was it Chomsky or?
It was Chomsky. Chomsky was saying that data science is not AI.
So I would agree that data science is not AI. Data science is the practical application of AI, but it's not AI in itself, right? And AI is a bit of an umbrella term, and it means everything and nothing at the same time. So in this discussion today, I really narrowed AI into something very specific to deep learning, which is not all of what the AI umbrella is. So Chomsky's work is much broader than just deep learning. Deep learning is a small piece of it. And the data scientist doesn't actually do AI, they use AI, which is a slightly different thing. So you have to differentiate between the people who develop the algorithms, which is AI, versus the people who use it. My talk is really focused on using the AI, because I don't expect the people in this room to care about the development of the algorithms. I do think you care about using the algorithms. But they are separate things.
So my name is Dr. Imran. I'm a mental health psychologist and businessman. Every third person in the world is under stress right now, according to the data. The number one reason of seeing a doctor in the world is stress. And the reason is because we're talking to machines who has no emotions. So by talking more into machines, where will this take us into the next generation and next future?
So the question around, the implications from a psychological stress point of view is a big question, right? And it's not just about talking to machines. Actually, AI can start to learn how to interact with people with some level of empathy. It's actually being worked on as a research project, as we speak. And Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook is actually sort of committed to use AI to actually help create communities which are real people sort of connecting to each other, right? So you have to get the right balance. When I'm trying to get service on getting my cell phone to work, quite frankly, I'm not looking for a relationship or a sympathetic thing. I want some empathy to help me solve my problem, but I'm not looking for in CRM we talk about customer relationship management. I don't want a relationship with my banker or with my telecommunications provider, but I want them to solve my problem in an empathetic way. So I think AI can be used to do that effectively, but we also need to figure out how to get people close to the relationships they really have. Because if I'm always interacting with my device, then you lose the human connection. So, in this global world, my device allows me to talk to many more people through WhatsApp and all this kind of stuff. But the person I'm sitting across from for breakfast, I'm looking at my device instead of interacting with them, right? So there's also a social protocol that we need to develop to not get too addicted to our devices.
My name is Adil. I'm with TCS Connect. I was hoping that you would shed some light on this Cambridge Analytica and Facebook as part of that 10% blowback that you were talking about earlier. To what extent is it lack of regulation, or was it just open territory which was yet to be explored?
So I think the issue related to the Cambridge Analytica thing is that the privacy of the data was not respected. And this is why GDPR and the California Consumer Protection Act and so on are coming into play to make very clear what are the rules about doing this. Because that 10% activist is exacerbated by exactly those kinds of issues, right? And so I think we need to do a much better job in balancing the rights to use data, but also the right of the consumer to protect their own data. There's some very good research done at Harvard University in the School of Internet and Society around how do you get a rebalancing in terms of the right to use data for commercial purposes, but also the right of the consumer to decide what data should be used in which way. And so GDPR and CCPA are meant to rebalance. But it's definitely a big issue.
One final question for that.
Kasim Jubilee Line.
Where are you?
How soon do you see these deep learning AI technologies reaching countries like Pakistan?
How soon do I see them impacting? The reality is some of them are already in very narrow ways. It's already happening. But it's a small percent, right? And it's typically the larger organizations, telecommunications companies have a lot of data and they're figuring out how to use it to do interesting things. That's probably the most advanced use because they have a lot of data, right? But it's in the very beginnings. There's a lot of talk. The number of people who are actually doing it in full production is much smaller. There's a lot of prototyping and testing and so on. But it's immediate.
Thank you. This our final question. May I ask you to stand up?
So my question is actually two ways. One, as you mentioned, there should be 3,000 variables to understand a target segment, and we are a small business, so we might have like 10,000 different kinds of variables. So what do you think should be our first step, considering that it will take years or to implement these kind of technologies in Pakistan? It still hasn't come. And another question is that while I was visiting San Francisco, I could see a lot of, as you said, it's a Silicon Valley. So there are a lot of things that are already implemented there. It started from there. So there was something that I noticed in the mall. There was bespoke, and there were cafes where people used to get together and discuss, and these startups used to start. So what should an educational institute in Pakistan do to start off, and what kind of courses should they take to start seeing in the young adults' mind?
So the first question, I don't believe that you are years away from being able to exploit the technology, because people in Pakistan are, or I should say people, companies are already doing it today. Your first steps, do the simple stuff. Don't try to do the complex deep learning and so on day one. Use machine learning, understand how to use the linear mathematical models that will be familiar to, Pakistani organizations have been using this for a long time already. So automate those processes, right, and start building your internal processes and then sort of incrementally expand your data and your algorithms to be more sophisticated. But don't think you need to go to deep learning on day one, right, because that will not give you the early successes that you need. Use simple forms of machine learning and then progress the sophistication. Second part of your question around the education, I think it's important that we start building that skill sets of the next generation of these data scientists, the next generation of marketeers, the next generation of data engineers, and so on to do this. Data science is really a cross-disciplinary function. It means that you need to have some background in technology, I'll say like computer science. It means that you need to have some understanding of math and statistics. I also think, to the point of the question about Cambridge Analytica, data scientists should also take courses from an educational point of view in ethics and policy. Right? So really, it's a cross-functional discipline. You need to start building the culture among those. In the U.S., we have a program called STEM. So the educational system is investing in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I think we did not get it wholly correct. So I actually don't believe in STEM, I believe in STEAM. So the A stands for art. So I think we need to educate people in a humanistic way, in a creative way, because if you only educate in STEM, I create a bunch of robotic mathematicians that know how to do computer science, but they don't think creatively. And the robotic stuff will eventually get replaced. The creative stuff, that's sustainable. That's our value add as humans. And so we need to invest in creativity, not just the mathematical part of data science. Thank you very much. I'll stay around during the break. You can just come up to me and ask more questions. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your questions. And Stephen, I'd like you to stay on stage because now we're doing the real thing. That was the dry run before. May I ask President Nabi and Mr. Kawasaki Kayu to please come on stage and present Stephen with a much-deserved memento. Because now it's time to recognize our valued sponsors and partners who have contributed to making today possible. And we, from Matt, are very grateful for your support. So I'd like to call upon and invite our direct sponsor, HPL, representatives, Mr. Ali Habib, and his colleagues. Also, our gold sponsor, Teradata, Mr. Kayyum again, please. Shark Foods, our lunch sponsor. Jubilee Life Insurance, who is our silver sponsor. Hub Network, Mr. Faisal Qasim. Our supporting partner, K Electric. Please, if you could just come to the stage and join us. Academic partner from IOEM, Mr. Former President, President Tariq Karim, please. And our lead partner, Terraviz, Mr. Hamza Bazi Hashmi. If we could present the mementos, please. Sean? Anybody from Sean Foods? Okay, please.
I think we should get Hamza on the stage. Hamza.
Yes, Hamza, Mr. Hamza, come on the stage. Hum TV. Do we have anyone from Hum TV Network? Okay. Does everybody have a memento? Not yet. Just give us Karachi Electric. Electric. If I can ask our sponsors and partners to please stand in line for a nice photo opportunity. Come together, please. And if I can ask our audience to please give them a big round of applause. And if I can ask the council members to join us on stage, please, all of you. We very much appreciate their support, without which we could not have made today possible. So thank you. And I've talked to it. Okay, yes. Thank you, gentlemen. So now we will take a tea coffee break, and And may I request that we do our best to stay on program time, and we return at 11:45, please. 11:45, if we can return. Thank you.